I'm very keen to know now, Marsha, about the films that you like about space. Films that influenced you, that inspired you. Were there particular films? Are there particular films that you admire about space? Films that get it right, or maybe some that get it wrong? Interstellar, The Martian, 2001. Go for your life. I'm just keen to know what your movie diet was and whether movies played a part in you wanting to become an astronaut.
No, movies did not play a part in me wanting to become an astronaut. Reality played the part in me wanting to become an astronaut. Seeing real astronauts in real space flight, that was my inspiration. Having said that, I grew up reading science fiction, and I've been a huge science fiction fan, both in books and in movies and in TV shows, and I'm down with all of them. It's fine with me. I am a Star Trek fan from day one. So if you asked me Trek or Wars, I would say Trek.
Okay.
Not that I dislike Star Wars, but I'm a Trek fan. And so, whereas they're not inspirational, they are favorites.
Right, okay.
Okay. 2001, A Space Odyssey, of course, is a classic. And so that's important. Apollo 13 is probably the only movie that got it right as far as doing the zero-G portions of it. And that's because they filmed it in zero-G. They built an Apollo capsule mock-up and they put it in a zero-G airplane that flies a parabolic path where it's sort of like a loop, not a loop, but a sine wave kind of thing. And, you climb steeply for a while where you feel twice your weight, and then as you come over the top of the hill and you push, you're weightless for 30 seconds, and then as you come down to the bottom of the valley again, you're pulling twice your weight.
Isn't that plane called the Vomit Comet?
It's called the Vomit Comet because going from 0 gravity to 2 gravity every 30 seconds sometimes makes you a little sick.
You've been in the Vomit
I've
Comet.
been in it. I've not done the vomit part, but I've been in the airplane. Anyway,
it's aptly named.
It is aptly named.
Are you meant to not eat before you go on that thing?
Yeah, I try not to eat before I go in that thing.
But are you supposed to not eat?
You do whatever it is that works for you.
Okay.
But they filmed the scenes that were zero gravity scenes for that movie were filmed in that airplane.
Right. Now, what about Interstellar?
Interstellar. All right, so let me divide movies into two categories. Ones that are reality-based and ones that are more fiction, science fiction, fantasy-based. So, for example, in a Star Trek movie or a Star Wars movie, that technology of boldly going and aliens and being able to walk on a spacecraft with having artificial gravity and phasers and warp drives and transporters and all that. I've bought into all of that, even though none of it really exists, because I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
It, in my mind, doesn't violate laws of physics. It's just ones we haven't figured out yet. That's the way I see it. When you get the class of movies like Gravity or Apollo 13 or The Martian, where this is today's technology or close to today's technology, then I'm very sensitive when they violate laws of physics, which is why Apollo 13 was very accurate and Gravity was not accurate in the least.
Oh, really? Because that was doubted.
There was nothing correct in that movie.
All right. Did that irritate you, though? They irritated you?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
It did. I mean, it's entertaining. And,
yes.
It made for an entertaining movie experience, but no one should think that that's the way it works on space shuttles and space stations.
What was it that irritated you about the inaccuracies of Gravity?
Oh, where do I start?
Can you give us a shot?
Okay.
Give us your three big ones.
Well,
Because people would want to know.
First of all, the space shuttle, the space station, the Japanese space station are not in the same orbit, nor are all of the communication satellites in the same orbit. Even if they were, you couldn't get from one to the other. And you certainly couldn't get from one to the other with a fire extinguisher.
Okay. Fair enough.
I mean, I could go on, but it just isn't right.
Are you there? See, you sitting there, Mush, in the cinema with a whole bunch of people totally enthralled by this movie, going,
moaning.
That's not true.
Moaning, hanging my head.
That's not right.
Hanging my head.
But you give it license because it's emotion.
You know what? 500 people are going to know it's not right. And a couple science geeks that actually understand physics are going to know it's not right. You can go to the movie. You can go to a movie thinking you're seeing reality, or you can go and suspend your belief in reality and just enjoy the experience. And,
Right.
and that's really the way you should see it.
Does it please you that when people talk about whether they're Trekkies or Star Wars people, that what they're actually referring to is the values promoted by those films, not really the technology or the effects, which often they love, but when you talk to Trekkies, for instance, it's all about the whole thing about unity of man and of humankind working together and so forth.
Yeah, that too. I mean, I'm cool with the cool, not yet invented technology. There and the Vulcans and the different alien races, and in the original Star Treks, it was less about fighting wars and blowing things up as it was about, like you said, human values and interpersonal reactions, and there were storylines. And you invested in the characters and you invested in the story. And sort of that's what I like. Today's movies, whether they're space movies or not, because they can, have to blow something up every 10 seconds. And to me, that's just a little over the top.
Marsha Ivins, the human population is divided into two very, very unequal parts. There are those who have not been to space, and there are those who have been. And you're part of that fraction of a fraction of a percent who's been there. How has that experience changed you?
I'm often asked that question, and I'll give you the answer that I always give to that. Going to space and being in space didn't change me, I don't think, so much. I would like to think it made me maybe a little more tolerant of things, because you do get faced with your complete insignificance in the whole galactic scheme of things. When you look at the stars and you go around the globe in 90 minutes, all of those little things that annoy you every day, that traffic is bad, and this person is on my last nerve, and whatever your everyday dramas are, just can't reach you there. And I'd like to think that I don't get as upset about those things as I used to. More important, though, it has given me the opportunity, because I have had this experience, to travel around the world and share that experience with people all over the world. And I give a presentation that talks about human spaceflight, and not my story necessarily, but our story, what you can do, a like-minded group of individuals who have put their like mind to a task and accomplished it, going to space. And I find that no matter where I go in the world, no matter what the language or the religion or the culture, people laugh at the same things. They ask the same questions. They ooh and ah, and that, I think, is an important lesson, that people all over the world are basically the same.
Are you a nightmare at parties, at social gatherings? Because it must be like you're talking to someone. So what do you do? Well, I've just learned to operate my lathe. What do you do? Well, I've been to space 5 times. It's, it's hard to top.
No, I don't. First of all, I'm not a very social person, so I don't go to parties and things like that, particularly with people I don't know. I mean, I don't go to bars and clubs, and I never lead. And I rarely tell anybody what I am or what I've done, because when I do, it changes the conversation. Well, what do you do? Well, I operate a lathe, or I'm a chef, or I'm a, so if I said I'm an astronaut, I've stopped becoming the person you were interacting with, and I've started becoming this weird, interesting thing. And I prefer not to do that. So if I'm in an occasion where somebody says, what do you do? Are you here for work? What are you doing? I go with something else. I'm an engineer. I'm here to support a movie. I helped in the production of this movie, that kind of thing. I lead with another of my job titles.
You sound like such a level-headed, disciplined person, which I imagine partially must come from the training that you've had. But are you ever struck with moments of awe by the experience that you've had? I mean, are you ever in the middle of shopping and then suddenly stop and go, my God, I've been to space 5 times? Does that ever occur to you?
It did way back, but I remember I was renting a car in Los Angeles many, many years ago. And, the pictures that we take on board the space shuttle and the space station are all public domain. And so occasionally one particularly nice picture might get released and used for something. And I had taken a picture of a storm, and it just, the lighting was really nice. And I was sort of proud of that picture. And I looked up on a billboard, and there was my picture, and I forget what it was advertising, and I nearly ran the car off the road thinking, I took that picture. Look at that. I took that picture. So rarely there's an opportunity like that.
Listen, I have to ask you, at what stage of your training at NASA were you at when the Challenger incident occurred? And how did that affect you?
I had not yet been assigned to a flight. I was supporting flights. The job that I had just been working was actually to strap crews into the shuttle before it launched, and this was the Challenger flight was the first one I didn't do in a year. I just handed that job off to somebody else, and of course, it's a horror to watch that kind of thing, and it is a shock, but it's not unexpected. I mean, I don't want to say that we expect it to happen, but we're all aware that that's a very real risk that it could happen. And let us not forget the Columbia accident. On the way back, it's the same way. I mean, I was also still in the office. Now my flights had been over. I was not going to fly again, but Columbia was the first spacecraft I flew on.
Were you on the next shuttle after?
No, I had not. I had not been assigned before the Challenger accident, and my last flight had been a couple years before the Columbia accident.
Right, because obviously those incidents and the recent incident on the launch pad, that launch pad explosion, which everyone in the world got to see, must have been a very sobering reminder that every time you went up, you were strapped to the top of a multi-billion-dollar firecracker.
Yeah, it's not something that ever leaves your mind. It just doesn't dominate your mind when you do it. But yes, like I said, the risk is very real, and we've demonstrated, sadly and fatally, that the risk is very real. We take the risk because we think the reward of the mission and the reward of what we're doing in going to space is worth taking that risk.
And what do you do now? You basically just lecture, you give talks, and work on these films?
The films is not my livelihood. I was very fortunate. I consider myself very fortunate that Toni asked me to consult on this movie because there's nothing I wouldn't do for her and for the Imax films. But that's not a normal thing. I have consulted on a couple other movies very briefly, but that's not my livelihood. I do aerospace or engineering consulting when people are interested. So I've done a little bit of that for different groups. And
I'm very keen to know just what you think of the space program in general. People always complain about the expense and so on, but I just wanted your view on the return that society gets from the space program. Are you able to quantify that in any way?
I don't know that I can quantify that. The fact in America that we went to space and we put people on the moon, sort of sets America off as the people that went to the moon. When the Chinese go to the moon, we'll see what that does in people's minds about space travel and countries who are number one in science and technology. And maybe it won't be America. I mean, we'll see. I think for any country that has a space program, it instills a sense of national pride that my country did this thing. We landed a probe on Mars. We brought a sample back. Whatever it is, I think that's a very important thing for any country that has a space program. And more important, when you choose to do something that is very hard and that has not been done before, the technology that you have to invent that allows you to do that enables that mission, always has a payback.
Okay, just got two more questions. One is on the record, the other one is off the record. What's going through the NASA training program as a woman? Did you encounter gender issues? Of course, it's a very big topic now about inequality between the sexes, even though it's 2016. What's it like at NASA? Are they absolutely strictly just totally blind to gender, or is gender an issue at NASA?
I like to think that we women treated the men as equals.
Mm.
People are looking for the story that says there's a big gender issue and women are, not treated well. But it really, in my humble opinion, and this is just my opinion, if I don't treat myself as I'm a woman first, then you won't either. I am an astronaut who happens to be a woman. Or, you're an astronaut who happens to be a man, or an astronaut. And so I did the job first. And because I was a woman, big deal. Now, because I was a small woman, there were certain things I couldn't do, like be as efficient in a spacesuit as a bigger guy. Because I was a small woman, there were things that I could do, like get into tiny places where the big guy couldn't get.
So basically, the approach was, can the person do the job? So it was the training first. It was the meeting the skill level first.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, because I think people would like to know that.
And astronauts today have to pass a sort of set of qualifying skill demonstrations in everything that they do, and the bar is the same whether you're a man or a woman, and you pass it or you don't pass it.